Hi everybody, this is month 3 of the big blocks, and this is our first rectangle block, which is a 12 by 24 block, which I'm really excited to show you, which I'll do here in a minute. Well, actually, let me show you now. This is the top part of it, and this is the bottom, and I haven't sewn it yet because I want to show you how to match that up. But hopefully you can see that. And so it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flying geese on it, and then there are separating blocks. So when we did the cutting video, we cut these little in-between pieces that allow this to go together, which I'll show you here in a second when we go to put it together. But let's first talk about flying geese. So there are lots of methods to make flying geese, and the no waste method and the Eleanor Burns method, which I love, make 4 at a time. And these rectangles that we're doing, we only need one. We're not doing multiples of the same color. And so I really struggled with, do we do them and then have a whole stack of them and use them later? But I decided no, we would make them using stitch and flip. And that way, if you don't like one of the colors or something goes wrong, it's easy to substitute and you're not making 4 and only using 1 or 2 of them. So that's the path we're taking. So to do a stitch and flip flying goose block, you have cut these at 3.5 by 6.5, okay? And then we are going to do stitch and flip, which, as you know, we're going to add a corner and we're going to stitch. So let me show you the 2 different ways here we've got going. So I've already done this first one, so let me show you the second one. So this is the method where we've drawn the line, and you would sew on this line, down the way, and then you would press this, flip this up, and again, I always trim out that middle layer, and there is a skill sheet out there and a skill video. Then I press this up into the corner like this, and I trim that up, and I make sure that it's nice and square when I press it. The tricks with this is one, making sure you do this in the right direction. I managed to sew several of them upside down. But the real trick is that you need to have a 1/4 inch from the point here to the outside edge when you do this. Because if you don't, then when you go to sew it in, you're going to lop your points off.
Can you hold it towards the camera? There you go.
There you go. So that needs to overlap so that you have a 1/4 inch from there to there. Okay? And that's important, or you're not going to have your 1/4 inch. The other thing that's relatively important is that you try to keep it as square as possible. And I did use my Eleanor Burns ruler once I got them sewn on to put it down and make sure it was really square. And one of them was off quite a bit. I couldn't make this line up, and I thought, oh, I can make it work. Well, I couldn't make it work. It was the green one, and I actually had to remake the whole thing to get it square. So it is important to make sure they're square too, okay? Now the other method that we have used in the past, or we've used and I've talked about, is using the corner clip ruler, the folded corner ruler, which we talked about last time. The trick with this is making sure you clip the right corner. I can't tell you how many of them I clipped the wrong corner. So you want to make sure that it's going to flip up like this. So this is the angle that we need to cut, and that's the best way. Now, if you have the mini ruler, just know that 3.5 inches, which is what these blocks are, is the maximum size for the mini ruler. If we go any bigger, you would need the larger ruler, but I don't see us going any bigger this year. But notice I've got this in place right here. And when it's in place, I'm just going to cut this. All right, and now I'm going to go and sew from point to point using my 1/4 inch seam, or 1/4 inch foot, or however you do a 1/4 inch. Whichever way you do it, whether you're drawing the line or you're using the pre-cut method, the trick is making sure you keep it as square as possible. Now, I was just telling the girls out front that when I sewed without my dual feed, especially sewing this 1/4 inch seam, I was getting a lot of stretching on the seam. And when it stretches, it's hard to get it square. When I engaged my dual feed, I had a completely different story. So, you know, dual feed is one of those things, if your machine has it, that will really help when you're sewing bias to keep it from stretching and also to keep it from shifting while you sew, which is important for both of these. So you're ultimately going to make, let me show you, you're going to make 5 of these. So here are the first 3, and here are the next 2, so you can see them. And again, the trick is when you go to sew these in is that you can see this point, and they are all right on the point, which is exactly where they should be. And I need to press that up a little bit, but it also depends on how fussy you are. So when you go to sew them together, you're going to look at the pattern, and the pattern's going to show you, for this one, this is a 5 1/2, this is a 2 1/2, and this is a 5 1/2. And then when you come down here, you have the 2 1/2s here and the 1 1/2s out here. So you just sew them together end to end. Because you have so many seams that you are pressing, the good news is there's no match point. You want to make sure that you're probably sewing a good scant 1/4 inch, because the next thing you're going to do after you sew these is come back, and this is your 3 1/2 by 24 1/2 inch piece. These need to match these. And I will tell you, there was a little stretch going on for because this was a little bit shorter because of all the seams, especially this one with all the seams. But I went ahead and, oh, you're gonna save me from that, right? I went ahead and worked that in so that fits. Now the last step, and the reason I didn't sew it together, is when we go to sew this together, yes, you're going to match the ends, but you may be wondering, well, how do you know? Because the fun thing is there's no matched seams. The only thing that, if you want to match anything up, if you want to know that you're lining things up, is the middle of this should be touching the middle of the connector blocks, and that puts them exactly halfway in between. So all I did was I measured over, this was 6 inches, and put a dot at 3, and I measured this over, and that is 3 inches, so I put a dot at 1 1/2. Is that correct, or is it 2? My brain. Let's see. No, it's 2. So these were cut at 2 1/2. So I put it at 1, and then when I flip it over to match it up, my little pins, I just put those 2 dots on top of each other, and then I do that in both places, and then I work out to my ends, and I pin my 2 ends, and then I ease everything else in between, so that when I get done sewing, it will be so pretty, and it will be lined up just like that. Isn't that pretty?
That's fun.
It's a fun block. One of the first quilts I ever made was it was a snake quilt, and it did this, and then you made this 3-dimensional head at the end, and it was a super fun quilt, and I didn't make them this way. This way would have been much easier to make them. And this one's really easy. This will be a quick one for you. The only other thing I want to tell you about is if you do the corner trim, or even if you do the draw the line, you end up with all these triangles. Don't throw these away. These actually make a pretty decent size half-square triangle. I just went ahead and brought, when I did the pre-trim, and I just stacked the triangles on top, and when I power sewed last night, I would sew this, and then I'd sew the triangle, and I'd sew the next one and sew the triangle, and I end up with a whole stash of half-square triangles from all these things that we're doing. So I encourage you to save those, because you can work those into the back or the border or whatever you want when we're all done with this. So that's what I have for you. Just FYI, we're heading to Bernina University next week, and so we should have announcements coming soon of about a lot of new products and new things to share with you. So Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next month.